Welcome everyone to the event today. I am happy to have you here. We are going to pass the microphone over to Nicola Nosengo from Nature Italy. He is going to start off the event, so thank you for joining us today.
Thank you and welcome everyone. Good afternoon or good morning or good evening, depending on where you are, because we know that we have a very international audience today for this event. I'm Nicola Nosengo, I'm the Chief Editor of Nature Italy, and I have the pleasure to welcome you to our virtual event on the science and technology of cultural heritage. This is the first of a series of events that Nature Italy wants to organize on a regular basis to focus on research fields where Italian scientists are making a difference, on the fields where the experiences and contributions of the Italian community are most relevant at the international level. As you may know, if you follow us, Nature Italy has just celebrated its first year. We launched in October 2020. And as we enter our second year, we want to use this format more and more beyond articles as an additional way to cover important stories and debate hot topics for Italian research. And we chose to start today with cultural heritage because it is a topic that most people throughout the world, even those who are not necessarily interested in science, associate to Italy, and for very good reasons, of course. Italy holds an impressively large share of the world's cultural heritage. It is the single country with the most UNESCO heritage sites. It has cities that are literally open-air museums, such as Rome, Venice, Florence, and that host some of the world's most famous actual museums. It has unique archaeological sites such as Pompeii, Ercolanum, Pestum, Agrigento, and many more. It was home to Leonardo, Michelangelo, Raffaello, and many more artists whose works are preserved and displayed in Italy to this day. But all these things do not just make Italy a favored destination for tourists today, just like they made it a destination for young Europeans for their grand tours in the 19th century, but all these things make Italy a big laboratory to show and to prove how science and technology can be applied to the study, to the preservation, to the valorization of cultural heritage. And with our four guests today, we just want to take a journey through some case studies that show examples of how dealing with cultural heritage does not only mean preserving and celebrating the past, but in fact means producing new knowledge that is extremely relevant for the present and for the future. It means experimenting with new technologies, introducing innovations that can be applied all over the world and help transmitting cultural heritage to the next generations. A very quick presentation of our four guests today. We'll hear more about them, each of them later, but they are Marcela Franzipane from Accademia dei Lincei and the University of Roma La Sapienza, Costanza Miliani from the CNR Institute of Heritage Science, Luigi Petti from the University of Salerno, and Ariana Travis, who is the coordinator of the Center for Cultural Heritage Technology of the Italian Institute of Technology in Venice. As you may know, if you had registered for the event some time ago, we were supposed to have also Andrea Cardarelli, a specialist in proto-history from Sapienza University in Rome and an archaeologist, with us today. But unfortunately, due to a temporary health problem, he cannot be with us today. So before starting, we wanted to send him our best wishes for a speedy recovery. We'll touch on many different topics today. We'll see how physics and chemistry can be used to monitor and diagnose the conservation state of artistic works, how advanced sensors can be used to protect large sites from natural risks, how artificial intelligence and space science can be applied to the study of cultural heritage. We will have a Q&A question at the Q&A section at the end of the event. The audience is very welcome to use either the chat tool or the proper Q&A tool in Zoom to ask questions throughout the event. We will note them down and use them in the final discussion, but we will not have individual Q&A sections at the end of each talk. This was just a service announcement for our audience. And with that, we can start our agenda, and we can start with really in some sense, the core discipline when it comes to cultural heritage, archaeology, where we'll have a talk that will show us how archaeology is in some sense the most modern, global, and interdisciplinary science you can think of. And our first speaker today is Marcela Franzipane, who has been for many years a professor of archaeology at the Sapienza University in Rome. She's a member of Accademia dei Lincei, as well as several international academies, from the National Academy of Science in the USA, the British Academy, and the German Archaeology Institute, and many more. Marcela Franzipane is also a member of Nature Italy's Board of Trustees, and in this capacity, she has effectively overseen scientifically the organization of this event today. She's done field research in many areas of the world: Mexico, Italy, Egypt, Turkey, among others. And recently she was in the news because the Turkish site of Arslan Tepe, where she has worked for 30 years coordinating a scientific expedition of the University of Rome, this summer was added to the list of UNESCO World Heritage Sites, really mostly as a result of the scientific work she and her team did there. So without taking more of your time, I will leave the floor to Marcela Franzipane for her introductory talk today. Welcome, Marcela. You have to unmute yourself.
Okay.
Yeah,
yes, thank you very much. I will start just in half a minute. I will share my screen. Okay, is visible? Yes.
Good.
Okay. So my topic here is a kind of very general, but at the same time quite complex topic, because is what Nicola said, is try to highlight in which sense and how archaeology can be called now one of the few real global sciences because its characteristics. So in the past few decades, as many other sciences, of course, we have seen a progressive increase in specialization due to the enormous increase in available data, knowledge, and information. And at the same time, this led to the perception of the many dimensions of archaeology. And this has gone hand in hand with the development of new interdisciplinary scientific fields that are not new anymore, since they have been applied for many years, such as archaeobotany, archaeozoology, geoarchaeology, physical anthropology, paleopathology, palynology, archaeometry, etc. But recently, besides these traditional fields of natural science contribution to archaeology, new areas of research and applied techniques have developed. Advances in technology, for instance, have made it possible to employ new field exploration techniques, such as archaeomagnetism, georadar investigation, LIDAR surveys, etc., which have helped to recognize archaeological sites and monuments, even where the environmental conditions, both natural and artificial, were constraining factors. For example, vegetation or sites in urban context, in urban space. But the most remarkable enhancement that has greatly expanded the research horizons of archaeology and its cognitive potential is coming from the creation of new specialized scientific fields in natural sciences and also in other sciences that are making investigation for answering questions that were inconceivable a few years ago. So research into the DNA conducted on both human and animal remains have led to the reconstruction of kinship relations, for example, population movements, migratory phenomena, and these movements related to both human beings and animals, flocks, for example. Stable isotope analysis conducted on human and animal bones, as well as on vegetal remains, have made it possible to reconstruct ancient diets and the displacement of individuals and groups from their places of origin based on their dietary habits, rainfall levels and fluctuations, paleoclimate then, and biochemistry and the identification of organic residues preserved in both pottery and floors have revealed food contents and food processing, as well as other activities, often highlighting also the differences between domestic and non-domestic context. Finally, microsedimentology on both stratigraphic, sequence, and floor levels, together with the study of micro-remains trapped into the clay of floors, for example, have greatly contributed to the identification of activities carried out in different spaces and architectural contexts. And not to speak about the well-known GIS methodologies and landscape virtual reconstruction that have opened up new potential for acquiring knowledge about settlement patterns and, most of all, the relations between ancient societies and their territory and natural environment. The increase in the number of different specialized research sectors has paradoxically led to making archaeology, as we have said at the beginning, a global science, by combining many fields of knowledge, all contributing to pursuing common objectives and answering common questions. This stressed the need for continuous and substantial interdisciplinary dialogue. As Christiansen has recently stated, interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary collaboration is hard work that put demands on both sides to understand at least the basics of archaeology and of science in order to be able to collaborate critically and productively. This approach demands a close interaction not only with many sectors of the so-called natural sciences, as we have already shown, but also with other human and social sciences, such as cultural anthropology, history, and economics. The interdisciplinary approach led by archaeology has the potential to be a stimulus to the growth of other disciplines by pushing them to venture along new paths, sometimes experimenting with innovative routes and methodologies. This communication ranging beyond disciplinary boundaries is not easy, but it is, in my opinion, an intrinsic and distinctive characteristic of archaeology. If we consider it, archaeology, I mean, as a science whose ultimate goal is the history of man, which is therefore to be analyzed comprehensively, that is to say, in the entirety of the events and processes whose traces remain in the material culture. The fragmentary status of archaeological data certainly creates many problems, information gaps, and interpretative difficulties. But on the other hand, it makes the management of this multiple and varied information feasible, opening up enormous potential for a global understanding of history, capable of analyzing and linking the many aspects of collective life. Customs, daily practices, eating habits, social relations, technologies in use, economic relations, the structure of political power, ideologies, interregional and international relations, and also eco-factors and the human responses to them. The global dimension of archaeology, especially when it seeks to understand the crucial foundational phenomena in human societies, had certainly been already perceived since the 50s by far-seeing scholars like Gordon Childe and other archaeologists who have founded the discipline after him, and have given archaeology the dignity of a science, which is both historical and anthropological. In Italy, A child admirer, Salvatore Puglisi, defined archaeology and prehistory in particular as the history of the anonymous. That is to say, the history of people who have never written history with the capital H, and of whom no memory remains, but who have always been its real main players. A great contribution to the development of an interdisciplinary perspective was then made by the new archaeology school, primarily developed in the USA in the 60s and 70s, which focused on an anthropological approach, also emphasizing the close relationship of societies with both environmental and social factors. One effect of this has been, for instance, the introduction of concepts such as cultural ecology, for example. And finally, just to mention the most important historical step in the growth of our discipline, Karl Polanyi and the substantivist school, by highlighting the peculiarity of ancient economies with respect to market economies, highlighted the crucial role of the economic studies in archaeological researches, greatly influencing the analysis of early hierarchical and centralized societies. It is precisely thanks to this global and multidisciplinary approach, constructing an archaeology capable to explain phenomena, that the study of past society can significantly contribute to understand the present and address the future. We only have to think of the study of cultural contexts and migration phenomena, for example, very frequent in past societies. The impact of climate change, also in the past, and the different ways in which past societies reacted in different environmental and social contexts. Or even the transformation brought about on the environment by human behaviors, such as intensive agricultural or pastoralism practices, just to mention a few topics that have clear connection with the present problems. History does not repeat itself, but it rhymes, as Margaret Atwood wrote in her book, The Testaments. And Marc Bloch, the well-known historian belonging to the Les Annales school, significantly defined history as the science of man over time, a definition that can perfectly apply to archaeology. Now, just to go into more concrete examples, of course, I will briefly present how this approach, this multidisciplinary approach, has brought important results in the site where I have been involved for more than 45 years. I have been the director for 30 years, but I started working there in 1976. So that it's not good because this means I am old, but anyway. That is Aslan Tepe in Eastern Anatolia. The many decades of excavation that our team from Sapienza University of Rome has carried out in the mound have revealed the development of a long millenarian history in a region that was a cultural border between different cultural and geographic worlds. This 30-meter high tell, located in the fertile Malatya plain, few kilometers from the western bank of the Euphrates, was formed by the almost uninterrupted superimposition of settlements, starting at least from the 6th millennium BC till the Roman and Byzantine period. The long-term and extensive investigation has allowed to bring to light large sectors of each investigated settlement from the very beginning of the 4th to the 1st millennium BC. These are the settlements already extensively excavated, with levels full of in situ materials, offering a great deal of information on the development and changes across time of the Aslan Tepe society. This is just to show you how the pottery fragments excavated in a proper way and documented in a proper way and then restored can narrate us the history of buildings and the activities that were carried out there. I shall necessarily concentrate here on one of the main periods and cases, which besides having the best preserved architectural and material remains, is the most complex and significant for the understanding of crucial anthropological processes of change leading to the development of hierarchical societies, that is the fourth millennium BC. In the fourth millennium, Arslan-Tepe became a strong political, economic, administrative, and religious center with a powerful and sophisticated system of control over a substantial portion of the stable economy, to the point it can be defined as an early state system. The site was already a local powerful center, at least from the first half of the fourth millennium BC, what we call period 7, when an elite area with monumental residential buildings and 2 large temples stood out on the top of the ancient mound, marking a sharp social and symbolic distinction from the rest of the settlement. Here you see some of the elite residences and some photos of them, and the 2 temples partly destroyed, unfortunately. In these temples, the economic administrative transactions were concentrated and in what we call, they were ceremonial buildings. We don't know if they were temples in the proper sense of the term, but they were certainly ceremonial buildings and were adjacent to the elite residences, probably, this building yielded thousands of mass-produced bowls and had hundreds of clay ceilings, that is, seal impression on the clay ceiling, of course. The Arslan-Tepe elite in this period, therefore, centralized and redistributed staple goods in the form of food in a sort of sacred ceremonial context similar to the Mesopotamian model, and probably derived from the spread of the so-called Ubaid culture in the previous millennium. But a great development at the same time and a radical change occurred around 3400 BC, what we call period 6a. The temples were abandoned and replaced by a huge and ever-expanding monumental complex, including both public and residential areas, extended over more than 4,000 square meters, which may be rightly considered to have been the earliest example of a public palace that has ever been discovered so far in the Near East. The contact with the public was not anymore in a sacred area dominated by temples, but in a huge courtyard where people gathered and were received by the authority in an imposing building at the edge of the courtyard, which did not exhibit any element resembling any kind of religious function. Here, a series of aligned platforms indicate the places where the person in authority gave audience to the people, probably sitting on a higher platform or podium where the finding of small juniper woods, and here we start with the importance of the contribution of the different sciences to the reconstruction of ancient history. These were small pieces of juniper woods, very different from the pine, oak, alder, big beams collapsed from the roof. And this may perhaps indicate the presence of a furniture, probably a seat or a throne. The persons who were given the audience were standing in front of this podium at predetermined fixed points according to well-codified secular ceremonies. A large room behind this reception place was provided with a long, low platform table with a fireplace. You can see here the room and the platform. Yes, with the fireplace. Microsedimentological and chemical analysis conducted on the floor of this room, on the clay platform and on the fireplace, have proven that both the platform and above all the fireplace were extremely clean, suggesting that the fire was being constantly lit not for cooking and also probably not for eating, but as a kind of sacred fire visible behind the head of the person sitting. These are the chemical results. And this is the position of the fireplace with respect to the windows and the seat podium. So probably this fire was visible from behind the person sitting on the throne, as in this image can be reconstructed. In this huge and monumental early palatial complex, in addition to a wide variety of public functions, redistribution of food took place in a secular way. In central stores and courtyard, the data obtained at Tezcatlipoca confirmed that the goods accumulated and centrally managed were essentially food and the labor needed to produce it. This is evidenced from the type of small storerooms not designed for long storage of durable wealth and from their content. The rooms were full of vessels, pitoi and jars, probably containing processed food, perhaps prepared meals, which had to be continuously re-put into circulation as suggested by the archaeobotanical analysis that has revealed very scanty remains of grains in the stores. In the distribution storeroom, only few fragmented cereal seed, suggesting they were the result of grinding process. Large numbers of clay ceilings and mass-produced bowls were connected with food management and distribution to large number of people in a non-cultic environment. These people must have therefore been workers, probably offering their labor and services to the central institutions and being compensated with food. I believe that the majority of the population must have continued practicing their agricultural autonomously in the well-watered Malatya plain, where the hydrogeological study has shown that besides abundant rainfall, there were many springs whose water could have been easily captured and brought to the fields. Thanks to the peculiar also hydrogeological karst conditions. The rise of such a highly centralized economic policy focused on primary production is however an indirect clue to the possible expansion of the control exercised by the rulers over land and flocks. In this perspective, the extraction of labor must have been a key aspect of the centralized production system. The contribution of archaeozoology, archaeobotany, and stable isotope analysis have been crucial to understand the functioning of this centralized economy. Archaeological studies have evidenced a remarkable increase in sheep rearing, suggesting new forms of specialized pastoralism. A certain degree of possible central intervention over agriculture has been suggested by the results of archaeobotanical and stable isotope studies on vegetal remains recently carried out at Tezcatlipoca. Carbon and nitrogen stable isotope analysis conducted on vegetal remains from the Pallas period have shown a contrasting trend in the amount of water absorbed by woods and seeds respectively. Whereas the isotope composition of woods, particularly oak, reveals a certain decrease in rainfall, so a more drier climate. A drier climate that was followed by instability, we can say, in the climate. Barley and wheat seeds show a higher water concentration, hence suggesting the intensification of irrigation practices. This pattern is compared with the following, period, when the centralized system collapsed at Tezcatlipoca and the water presence impulses significantly decreases, witness a possible central intervention in the management of water control at the end of the fourth millennium, even in this region, where agriculture could have been perfectly conducted at a village or family level. This evidence, together with the indication of increased manuring practices, suggests that the ruling classes may have pushed to the intensification of agricultural production for their own benefit, if not directly controlling agricultural practices. The presence of a greater variety of agricultural products, among which some Triticum aestivum, more in need of water, confirms the effective and probably centrally directed or oriented management of agriculture in period 6a. In the following post-palatial period, Triticum aestivum disappeared completely, and the more resistant barley to reappear at the end of the third millennium. And the more resistant barley, now exclusively two rows barley, increased at the expense of wheat. Even the iconography of power expressed in seals and paintings, wall paintings in the Aslan Tepe Palace seem to have referred to agriculture and primary activities, but differently from southern Mesopotamia, did not show any clear reference to the ritual or religious sphere. Aslan Tepe, despite being the largest mound in the region, does not exceed 5 hectares in size, making it a small site in Mesopotamian terms. The absence of urbanization, which was conversely highly developed in Mesopotamia, also contributed to make the population more self-sufficient and made the wielding of central power less intrinsically necessary and potentially less solid. A developed metallurgy in the site that have been analyzed in the Bochum laboratory of Bergbau Museum have shown contact with the northern and northeastern Anatolia, confirming the interaction. These are the lead isotope analysis, confirming the interaction with mobile groups, perhaps of pastoralists moving across these regions and bringing metals and dairy products. Metal weapons and the defense wall around the palace document finally the possible resilience and resistance of the population to the heavy economic pressure exercised by central rulers, bringing about a crisis at the end of the period. The destruction of the Aslan Tepe Palace by a great fire around 3200 BC marks the definitive end of the palatial and early state system, which disappeared forever in this region. So between after 3200, so in the last 2 centuries of third millennium, transhumant herders with pottery and cultural tradition linked to southern Caucasus occupied the area of the palace ruins and settled in scattered wattle and dub huts. And in this period, we have also the construction of a big fortification wall on the top of the mound. And inside this space, we found a mass burial of secondary deposition. So all these things indicate conflicts, endemic conflicts between probably different groups of local population. So we tried to face this problem looking at the DNA. So who were these people? So there was a change in the population or not? So the analysis made in Jena, in the laboratory of Jena in Germany, have shown that in fact the Aslan Tepe population didn't change. It was an heterogeneous population, so there were different groups, but they were linked, they were very different from Central and Western Anatolia, and they were linked to Caucasus, to Irano-Caucasian groups. So,
I'm sorry, I'm sorry,
yes.
Marcela, I think
yes,
I have to play the ungrateful role of the moderator.
Yes. No, I have finished. I have finished. Okay. I just want to say, to conclude with a topic that I cannot touch here, of course, because of time, that is, sorry, okay, this big complex that we have a complete reconstruction now, or at least of the part brought to light so far, with a clear idea of the type of society was there. So we decided to exhibit this monumental complex that we have protected. And so I am open to any question then about this other topic. And we exhibited this to the public because we think that what we have to exhibit to the public is not just the monuments, of course, but the history that these monuments tell. So after so many years of research, we decided to go through this new step, that is the communication of science to the public. And this, the research and this conservation and exhibition practices brought, as Nicola said at the beginning, to the big success we have this year with the inscription of Aslan Tepe in the World Heritage List last July. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marcella. And when in my introduction, I went on a lot about the Italian territory and everything that the Italian territory offers in terms of cultural heritage. But of course, today we are also discussing what the Italian scientific community, how it is contributing to the study of cultural heritage throughout the world. And this case study of Aslan Tepe that Marcela Franzipane just presented is an excellent example of that, as well as an excellent example of the interdisciplinary nature of archaeological research and of its potential to touch on extraordinarily relevant topics for the problems we are facing today, from climate to economic models, inequality, you name them, all topics that are at the center of the debate today. But for that to happen, for cultural heritage to express this potential, let's say, this scientific potential, of course, it has to be preserved. It has to be passed on from generation to generation. And this means having a way to monitor its preservation state, diagnose the physical and chemical processes that may threaten cultural heritage, restoring it where necessary, understanding what techniques were used to make a piece of art, for example, so unique and so special. And this is a field where the CNR Institute for Cultural Heritage is working a lot and is giving great contributions. And today we have with us Costanza Miliani, who is the director of this institute, part of the National Research Council. Costanza Miliani is a chemist by training, if I am not wrong, and she will, but of course she leads an institute that uses multiple techniques and technologies to study cultural heritage, and she will give us a few examples of the very exciting work that her institute is doing. Costanza Miliani, welcome, and the floor is yours.
So thank you, Nicola, and good afternoon, good morning, good evening to this special audience. I'm very glad to be here with also distinguished colleagues to this panel to bring around the world what Italy can do in the field of science and technology for cultural heritage. I'm going to speak about some case studies where advanced methods are applied to understand the materiality of artwork. And doing that, I'm going to bring some example of experience we are having with a mobile laboratory that is a European mobile laboratory we are coordinating at the European level, that is bringing together the most advanced technological equipment together with competencies to give to the heritage science community a perfect laboratory that can travel and work in situ without sampling. So the characteristic of this CNR laboratory, that is also including, as you can see here, other important institutions in Europe, is to be mobile and to be non-invasive. This is something that is coming out from the genius logic of Italy, where the heritage is really in the territories. So we have to have a mobile laboratory to reach the heritage where they are. So the idea of this talk is not really to go into the methods, but more in how we can link the materiality of the object with the immaterial meaning of the object. So try to link the material science with the meaning of an artwork. And here in this image I took during the restoration of Raffaello painting Madonna del Cardellino at the Ufficio delle Pietre Dure, we can see how the materiality of the artwork is coming out almost brutally, I would say. And this brutality has been written perfectly by Cesare Brandi in his masterpiece about Teoria del Restauro. So the materiality of an artwork is coming out during the restoration, but it's still there in an artwork in the past, during the creation of an object, now because we have to restore, and also in the future because we have to preserve it in the future. And so starting with these case studies, I'm happy to share experience that is not only on the CNR, but spread around the different laboratories about Egyptian blue. It's one of the oldest synthetic pigments created by man. So it's the first synthetic compound probably that was created almost 5,000 years ago. And it has a very special property from an optical point of view. So it's very nice and powerful pigment, but also it has another property that is helping us in reconstructing ancient color when it is lost. And as you can see here in this image, it is emitting the light. So as a chemist, we were interested to understand exactly why this emitting of light, and we understood the composition of this pigment, that is the crystalline pigment that was prepared by mixing and firing at a rather low temperature, sand, and then calcium carbonate, copper compound, and natron. Natron was available on the oases in Egyptian countries. And so this compound has a copper 2 cations that is in a square geometry, and this square geometry makes it a special compound also from a photophysical point of view. It has a quantum yield of emission of about 100%. That means that one photon arrives to the molecule and one photon can go out of the molecule and be emitted as light. So it's almost a light bulb. And so why it is so nice for people doing or researchers doing diagnostics? That means that we can recognize Egyptian blue also in a very small trace. There are a lot of examples of this application in the literature. Here, one of the first cases we studied, the Nevermoon wall painting at the British Museum in London. And here I'm reporting one of the cases we had in Italy for this sarcophagus in Rome at the Basilica San Sebastiano. And here you can see in this image that are actually not so high technological. These are images you can acquire with the camera, but the technology is behind to understand the process of why this pigment is so fluorescent. And so here we can appreciate how color was distributed, how the object would have been colored and completely different from what we can see now. So interestingly enough, after this study on the optical property of Egyptian blue that are completely exceptional in the term of emission quantum rate in the near infrared, other researchers in other fields use this knowledge to use the same material for other applications, specifically in the production of solar energy and also to energy efficiency. So this is an example, quite nice example of spillover. So the research we are doing in the cultural heritage field, studying this material is actually important also in other fields. Another case study is Herculaneum papyri. We are moving to a bright blue to a dark black. So Herculaneum papyri are for the meaning and for the material value incredible. They are bringing to us the early philosophy, Greek philosophy as the primary written source. So something completely unbelievable as an importance. We have those Egyptian, those Herculaneum papyri because they were subjected to the eruption by the Vesuvius. So that means we have, but we cannot read it, unfortunately. So there were pilot studies by colleagues that tried to virtually unroll the papyri, trying to read the internal part. And these examples are very exciting from a scientific point of view, but the majority of these papyri are actually already unrolled by a physical method. This is the machine that during the end of the 19th century, a restorer at the Biblioteca Nazionale di Napoli applied. So this quite genius machine was applied to mechanically unroll the papyrus. So what we have right now is this thing. So almost all of them have been unrolled. So now the challenge is to be able to read the carbon-based ink used for the writing over a matrix that is carbon-based because it has been burned by the eruption. So very challenging from a chemical point of view, carbon against carbon. But we are lucky enough because this is what we see by naked eyes. And then if we use another light in the infrared, some letter came out. So this is an image, but we would like to have more really to go with the expert of papyrology inside all the written part of this rolled papyri. So we got a quite important European project on that, trying to apply different methodologies to read as much as possible of this incredible, valuable material. And here, for example, is the application through the mobile laboratory, European mobile laboratory of near hyperspectral imaging. And so it's something more than a simple image. And we were able to increase the capacity of reading by papyrology of more than 25% using near hyperspectral and chemometric and statistic analysis of the image. So we are moving more and more to be able to give more information to our colleague papyrologists. The principal investigation of the project is Graziano Ranocchia at the University of Pisa. And these are a last experiment we conducted using high resolution X-ray fluorescence mapping. So the method gives the distribution of elements, typically heavy elements in the periodic table. So you may ask why we are papyri, we are carbonate, so all organic, but nevertheless something came out. We are studying together in a co-working attitude with the papyrologists, the meaning of this image, but in any case, we have signal from lead and we are hoping to have new information from these maps. The first is calcium, so it's the structure of the papyrus that was typically treated, and then we have this ring of lead and this nice line that for sure are meaning something. But we will came out with this in a paper as soon as possible. Third case study is to say that studying material, we also discovered that there is a meaning. So there is a reason why one material is used against another one, a cultural meaning. So this is the case of the Mesoamerican codex. Mesoamerican codex are only 16 in the world. Can you imagine? Only 16 survived to the Spanish conquistador. All the other enormous corpus of codex of this population was destroyed. 16, and most of them are in Europe because they were saved, because they were sent to the monarchy, the monarchy that were paying the mission in America. So these were never studied from a material point of view because so unique, so fragile, impossible to be sampled. And when the field, we started a project on the Mesoamerican Codex, traveling around Europe in the Anthropological Museum of Madrid, in Rome, and the Vatican Museum Library, at the British Museum, and so on and so forth. So we analyzed almost all of them. And to make a long story short, we discovered having all this measurement on all these codex something. We studied the codex with different methods, spectroscopic methods, so different interaction of light, Raman spectroscopy, infrared, fluorescence spectroscopy, and so on and so forth. And what we discovered that most of the material used here are dyes coming from flowers, plants and flowers specifically. And there is a reason, because these books were used to explain to the population, the religious, the society organization. And we know that they call the reading of this book as singing of flowers. So there is really an interaction and a meaning between the use of this codex and the material used for their decoration. Something more, because typically the dyes extracted from flowers and organic dyes in general are very prone to fading. But here, as it is for Maya blue, that is very well known, we have the use of these organic dyes interacting with the clay. So the population were able to use the dyes, but in a more sustainable way, with an interaction of a clay that is able to keep the dye more safe, let's say, to environmental interaction. And this is something that also has a spillover in other sector, because the idea of use of organic dyes intercalated in clay is also used now in the modern production of pigment and dye. The final, and we are doing quite a jump, we are arriving at the Jackson Pollock. Jackson Pollock is, yes, it's a very important painter. And here you can see him painting on the floor. And the painting here, I hope you can see that the mouse is alchemy. It's the one we were studying. And this is probably the first painting that he produced on the floor. And why is that? Because he got from Peggy Guggenheim, his mentor, a large studio. So he was able to move from New York to this much more convenient place. And so we are interested to see how the change in technology, in painting modus operandi, was interacting with the choice of material. And in this case, we are interested to study binding media, that are those polymeric materials that stitch the pigment on the surface. So this is alchemy, and all the points you can see here are the measurement done with the non-invasive approach. So it's only non-invasive that allow this large statistic, of course. And the reason of the study was a huge restoration of the painting, and the restoration was done at Opificio delle Pietre Dure. The painting is at the Peggy Guggenheim in Venice, and here you can see a quite nice image where we have alchemy, and on the back the Adorazione dei Magi. And so this was quite a nice comparison, I would say. And so again, a long story short, I'm not speaking about the pigment identification, even though this is a quite interesting use of material. I call that molecular palette, because we think to Jackson Pollock as a very crazy man. Actually, he was selecting the material with the high precision. And we have a couple of blue pigment, couple of red, couple of yellow, to have a different effect. But going to the binding media, so the motivation of this study is here summarized. So the question was, is it going to change the binding media from a traditional oil to something more modern, because he was painting on the floor and he was looking for a dripping method. And so he was already introduced to this liquid paint during a famous experimental workshop in New York by Siqueiros. And then, as I told before, the real change is the move from New York to Springs with this very nice large studio. So he could put the painting on the floor. And this is the painting in a black and white reproduction. And using infrared spectroscopy in a non-invasive way in all these points, we were able to see that oil is there in some pigments, but also a new, completely new type of binding media that is alkyd resin is used on the drifting. And this was a brand new material, polymer, that was introduced in the market just in that period, but not for painting, for furniture, for housekeeping, let's say. And why this is important? It's important for him because the polymeric velocity of this compound is much more higher than oil. So he could achieve the drifting because he put this alkyd resin with the pigment and in a very fast way, the polymerization is occurring, while for oil, the polymerization is something like days. So it is impossible to have a drifting with an oil. And so this is also in collaboration with the National Gallery of Washington, possibly to be done in an imaging way. And this imaging system now is also part of the mobile laboratory in Europe. And as you can see here, it is possible to map the presence of oil and then map the presence of alkyd. And this is a quite important information for our historians. In this table,
sorry, Costanza, can I suggest to wrap up and maybe keep something for the end, because
this is the final, and in the final you see this change from alkyd to oil. And yes, what he was saying is needs new technique. And this sentence I like very much because it's something that was for mobile laboratory also. So we need something to do a massive number of measurements to have as much as possible information on such a complex material. And this is made possible by a research infrastructure that is really giving access to mobile laboratories, to heritage science all over Europe. What I think now is the future. So what are our needs now for new methods, as Paulo is suggesting us, is data-driven analysis. So all these interaction between meaning of a material and material composition can be done through data analysis. And I'm sure Ariana will also keep this point for her. So we need really a new way for treat data and for treat the massive number of data produced by non-invasive analysis to have a much more in-depth understanding. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks you so much for this fascinating presentation that brought us to different eras and to completely different historical periods, and also showed how the work on cultural heritage can have interesting spillovers, because as always in science, when you tackle complex problems, you end up with solutions that can be applied also to other problems. We mentioned the amount of cultural heritage that is on the Italian territory in the beginning, but that cultural heritage doesn't sit on a quiet territory, unfortunately. The Italian territory is very prone to natural risks. If you think about it, some of the most famous heritage sites in Italy, like Pompeii, Ercolanum, are really the result somehow of a natural catastrophe. And there is big seismic risk in Italy. There are some areas that will be exposed to new risks because of changing climate. And that explains why the preservation of cultural heritage also needs the expertise of engineers, of experts in seismic and other risks for buildings, such as our next speaker, Luigi Petti, who is a professor in design of structure and seismic building at the University of Salerno. Is involved in the preservation and of sites, including the Pestum Archaeological Museum, the Pompeii Archaeological Museum. He's worked in particular on sites such as the Trajan Arch in Benevento or the Neptune Temple in Pestum. And in his presentation, he will show us a bit of the technologies that can be used to monitor the structural stability of historical building sites, while also learning a bit about them and about how they were built, they were construed. Welcome, Professor Petti, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Nicola. Thank you to everyone, and good day. I would like to introduce briefly some aspects about the risk management with regard to cultural heritage. When we speak in Italy, but also in other parts of the world, of the risk in Italy, we generally think to earthquake hazard. This is a map, for example, of the most relevant historical earthquakes that fought Italy. But if you go more inside in the single regions, for example, in the Campania region in South Italy, the one in this circle, we can see that we have a lot of other type of hazards, some natural, some due to human aspects, for example, the fire risk. But some of these risks are not less relevant with regard to the seismic one. For example, before Nicola spoke about the volcano risk, in this part of the slide, you can see the risk of the Regione Campania, and please do not think to the Vesuvio, but to the Flegrei area, which is one of the most dangerous in the world, not only in Italy. When we would like to speak about risk reduction, we need to try to remember the priority that was set by considering in particular 4 aspects. The first one is naturally the knowledge, the understanding disaster risk. This means the knowledge about the hazard, but as well as the capacity of the property and so on. The second one is also the risk governance, because understanding the risk is not only the one most important elements, but we need to have a process to manage this kind of risk. And the third one is money, is the need to investing for resilience. Please consider that, generally speaking, for each dollar that we spend to manage risk, we have a cashback in the future between $100 and $1,000 in means of disaster that we will not have in the futures. And naturally, disaster preparedness is another important aspect. All that means that we do not consider to the risk not as an exceptional managing or exceptional process, but we need to consider the risk inside the current activities, the current maintenance activities. And in this context, very speedily, I would like to show you 2 experiences in the archaeological parks of Pestum and Pompeii. The aim is to have a maintenance process supported also by the risk assessment and management activities. To do that, we need to have as first a dynamical view of the property, a dynamical view of how the property change in the time, because we need to consider our stones, please let me use this term, stones, are live elements that change in the time and change during the use of these particularly relevant properties. To do that, we can use nowadays very innovative sensors network, remote sensing, for example, but please consider, in any case, site inspection survey as one important aspect of this matter. Naturally, the data that we can have or that we already have are really big. And for this reason, other new type of technologies, cloud, IoT, GIS, BIM, are really relevant to make all this information together to assess a process inside this aim. And this is also important to give a support, for example, like the park of Pompeii and Pestum, a good support, easy support to the management process. And naturally, this involves not only the owners, but also the local stakeholders, international and local research groups, communities, and so on. In all this matter, naturally is clear, as stated by previous speakers, that we have a very multidisciplinary approach, several experience, competence. We need to take all that work well. And the first lesson that I learned in my experience is that a common language should be considered to give the possibility to all these peoples to speak together, and much more to share the aims. In the case of archaeological site of Pestum, we had a lot of past, of course, studies and a lot of research ongoing. In the last years, thanking to Gabriel Zuchtrigel, we had the possibility to put together several knowledges and to go in deep to other knowledge, to have a omnicomprehensive knowledge about the Templum of Neptune, omnicomprehensive from engineering point of view. We developed several activities like survey with laser scan, photometric, and etc. We carried out with the new kind of electrical tomography experiments inside to assess, for example, foundations, or outside to assess other part of archaeological aspect, to have a three-dimensional view of the systems. This is already shared in a lot of archaeological fields, and to produce more in-deeply geological aspect investigation. Please consider that in the case of Pestum, Archaeological Park of Pestum, the matter on which are built these Magnifica Templum are a part of the lens, because the matter are traversing a particular type of rock that was born just in this place for in the past for particular chemical and physical aspects of the water or of the river that go through this lens. But this occasion was also the possibility to go in deeply in the archaeological investigation to make a merge between archaeological aspects, geological one, geotechnical, engineering, architectural, and so on. All that to give us the possibility to make a mathematical model to have the capacity to assess the behavior of these particular structures. You need to know that in the case of structures built by stone block, the mathematical model are really so hard. For this reason, we developed several experiments to assess mathematical mine mathematical properties to go on with other more complex models in laboratory, until to reach this kind of experiments with support of University of Kassel in Germany with Professor Wedorka, in which a particular analysis, this one, that which name is hybrid analysis, use the real behavior of this column, which is higher 5 meters, to well understanding the complex behavior of the templum. Please see to this position to understand way we can record some damage in a real condition. But this is not enough, because the knowledge is a dynamic process. And due to this capacity and knowledge and experiences that we made, at the start of these years, we set up a monitoring systems on the templum. That is the one that you can see now in the image. With the dot blue and red, you can see accelerometers that was spread on the templum by using an advanced technologies that was developed at UNISA, at University of Salerno, by Professor Barone, within the work of the LIGO project. LIGO was the project that discovered the gravitational wave some years ago, in a very innovative systems that is a really local intranet, which give us the possibility by fiber optic get all the dynamic response of the templum. Here you can see just some of this application near the foundation. These 3 objects are the sensors, as well as in the top, these are the 2 of the other sensors that we put on site. And this is the toolbox that we usually daily by daily to assess the response. But it's interesting that if you remember the community aspects, and for that, we developed a page on the site of Pestum in which you can see in real time the response, the dynamic response of the templum. Several results we had. And one of the most interesting important is this one represented here, which represents with this red colored line the capacity of filtering of the soil in the foundation of the templum. Due to the particular geological aspects, we found a filter capacity of the soil to protect the templum against the earthwork. In this range, 110 Hertz, the wave, the seismic wave, are stopped. And if you put attention in the lower diagram, this is the response, the dynamic response of the templum. The response is just in this range. This is really, really interesting. But from my point of view, is more important, because in 1993, me and Professor Palazzo made a study just to realize this kind of filtering system. But this system, in the case of Pestum, is a natural system. Incredible. In the case of Pompeii, at Pompeii, there is already a lot of work done, mainly by the support and led by Professor Rosanna in the last years, with a lot of experiences, activities, and systems, and one of which is a data and process management system, which is a WebGIS that gives us the possibility to go inside the city, to take attention on each of the wall, each of the aspect inside the 500,000 square meters. This is the extension of the city. And for each part, we have a description also with a painted description of the problems related. But thanking to Professor Rosanna, there was also made other particularly deep research on geomorphological features, And this is really interesting, a remote sensing approach on the whole city of Pompeii by means or by the support of ISPRA Institute, Italian Institute. We have now the possibility to follow the path of movement in the soil and in the structures daily by daily. This is, for example, in these cases, by assessing movement just of the order of 1 millimeter. But also in this period, other problems was studied, like the surface water assessment around the city, because in the case of Pompeii, you know that there is a really complex city that you need to manage, in which also the usual current problems are, for example, the rain should be considered and managed. In the last period with Gabriel Zuchtriegel, we are experimenting a new possibility to make a dynamical assessment of the knowledge by expeditious survey systems that give us the possibility by a chart to assess the main aspect that can affect the conservation of the single parts of Pompeii. The effect is that when you read a particular risk condition, start a more focused analysis in that area. This is one of the scheduled organized in the last years to assess and design a maintenance process. This is the key, the maintenance, to manage the risk to avoid damage due to the hazard. And at the end of this really short presentation, the key is that to manage the risk, you need, of course, a knowledge and an hazard, very detailed hazard assessment. But these two parts are not sufficient. You need to have a monitoring, a surveillance, a continuous surveillance, a daily by daily surveillance, to make the possibility to have a dynamic risk evaluation. Each day, you go to see some part of this city or in other places, in other parks, and daily make an adjournment of risk assessment in each part. All this is a dynamic, of course, process, and is at the base of the maintenance problems. Naturally, you have a feedback from the maintenance process because there is a living system which make an upgrade of the knowledge, an upgrade of the hazard assessment, a change maybe in the monitoring and the surveillance, change what means that you put new strategies, new sensor where you need to have sensors. You need to take in account that much more data not always mean a compression
or knowledge
or a knowledge of the problems. You need to reduce the data to the minimum that you need to have to make a management of the risk. And naturally, these have an effect on the risk in the context that I explained before of very multidisciplinary approach. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much, Professor Petti. Indeed, interdisciplinarity has been a common theme in our meeting today, and I was personally very surprised, for example, to learn of a connection between experiments on gravitational waves and on the preservation of a site such as Pompeii, but that was only one of the very interesting topics that you touched on your presentation. We are a bit behind schedule, but we are now at the final presentation, and we spoke already a lot about data, about how to use data. Some of you may be familiar with the expression digital humanities, which has become fashionable recently. And of course, as many other fields, the work on cultural heritage is being transformed by the application of digital technologies, by big data analysis, by technologies such as machine learning, by the availability of space imagery. And these are only some of the topics on which focuses the Center for Cultural Heritage Technology in Venice, that was established by the Italian Institute of Technology in 2018, and that is led by Ariana Travis, who is our last speaker today. Ariana Travis is an archaeologist, but has been focusing now for many years on image processing, on multispectral and hyperspectral image processing, as well as on the application of artificial intelligence in particular, but not only to space imagery of cultural sites. So I welcome Ariana Travis as our speaker today. And yeah, we're looking forward to hearing your presentation, which will conclude our event.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me today. So as you mentioned, I'm going to speak about not just generic technologies in cultural heritage. Which,
sorry, Ariana, there is some noise, like some rhythmic noise when you speak. So maybe it's
really.
I
really have no idea, but I can use.
It doesn't prevent us from hearing.
Do you hear me now?
Yes, there's still the same effect, but maybe we'll. Okay, but maybe we will make do.
1 second.
It's not terrible, so we can manage, but maybe if you can try another device.
Can you hear me?
No. It was better before, honestly. Let's go on as we were before.
Let me second.
In the meantime, many people have asked in the chat about the recording. So the event is being recorded. All registered participants will get a notification in the email when it is uploaded and the instructions on how to access it. But we will make it accessible from the website of Nature Italy as well. But it's here now.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I changed my my headphone.
Perfect.
There was probably some sort of problem. Probably they were running out of energy. So sorry about that. So as I was saying, what I'm going to speak about today is not just the technologies applied or digital technologies applied to cultural heritage, what we have heard from Professor Petty just before me, but I'm going to concentrate specifically on something that we are working on at my center, which is artificial intelligence. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about what we are doing with that and how it combines with cultural heritage. So as you probably know, artificial intelligence by now is being used everywhere in our lives. We see it being used in cars, in houses, even in our houses, in public transportation, infrastructure management, economy. So many different fields. And it might sound quite strange to hear about that we are just at the beginning of using this type of technology also for cultural heritage and specifically for archaeology, which is a little bit what I'm going to tell you about today.
Sorry to interrupt again, Ariana. We don't see your screen now. I don't know if you were
really.
Okay. Referring
I was sharing. Let me try to
restore sharing and then.
Yeah, I will try again. Sorry about that. It looks like I'm very unlucky. Okay, let me see.
It's there. Great.
It's there now. Okay. Great. I'll start the presentation. Yeah. So, okay, are we all set now? Okay, good. I'll take it for granted then. So, artificial intelligence, I would say. So, artificial intelligence it's a concept that is a little bit hard to understand, because we speak about something artificial, but actually artificial intelligence is very much based on human intelligence, because machines by themselves are not able to compute anything without an adequate training. So the artificial intelligence involves the development of algorithms that enable computers to mimic our behavior, the human behavior. And what do we mean for algorithms? So algorithms are just a succession of instructions and steps that define the operation to be performed on the data that we are using in order to obtain some sort of results. And within the larger, broader scope of AI, as we were mentioning before, and Nicola was mentioning, there is machine learning. Machine learning, which develops methods that enable the system, the machine, to learn how to perform a task without being programmed for that. So without having direct human instruction. And within the machine learning specifically, there is something else called deep learning, which develops the so-called neural networks that are able to extract recurring patterns from the data that we use, which is like repeated structures and repeated things that happen several times. And the machine is becomes able basically to learn how to find them by themselves. So I would like to tell you something a little more about these applications and how we fit them into the different areas in which we apply of cultural heritage. And the first one is the one that Nicola was mentioning before, so the space technology. So before understanding how they fit together, how archaeology, AI and space technology fit together, maybe I will have to tell you something about the space technologies. What are these space technology? By space technology, we mean all the technologies that are being developed to be used for activities that take place beyond the Earth atmosphere, so outside of our planet. And among them, there is one called Earth observation. Earth observation is based on satellites that constantly rotate around the surface of our planet, capturing it from different point of view in all its parts, and are sending these images to operators on Earth that use these images for a variety of applications, from, for example, forest monitoring or transportation. But among these applications, there is also the one that we are interested about, which is cultural heritage, and more specifically, archaeology. So to understand how all this fits together in our conversation, we must take a step back and look not to artificial intelligence, but now to human intelligence before artificial ones, and look at what is the relationship existing between the space and what we can see more generically from above, and archaeology. So that's the first thing that we are going to talk about, and then we will see how this fits with artificial intelligence. So as you can see in this image that I'm showing you, archaeologists have noticed something many years ago, I would say almost a century ago, and they have noticed the occurrence of a strange phenomenon that enables to detect the presence of underground archaeological sites on images that are taken from above, from airplanes, from satellites now, from balloons. Anything that is above is able to get to perceive and record strange, let's call them for now, strange features. This phenomenon consists in the appearance of traces or marks, like the one you see in the image on the ground that are in these images, that indicates that there could be underground structures, and this underground structure could be archaeological. So there are clearly a lot of if. So what we see in these images is not the structures, the potential archaeological structures, but what they change over on the soil and the vegetation that covers them. So if we were there, if one of us was there and in the fields that we see depicted, this person would not see anything outside the ground. We would see just vegetation or soil. But what we can perceive from above is very different. And this phenomenon can occur, as you see in the image, both on vegetation and on bare soil. And it's due to different causes that we are going to investigate now. So let's look at this image and then see what happens when an archaeological structure is buried and vegetation grows on it. So when archaeological structures are buried underground, they can affect the growth rate of the crops above them, the crops of the grass or any sort of vegetation. The presence of these underground elements, like in this case, wall foundations or pavement, floors, produces basically a reduction in the depth of the soil that is available to the roots of the plants. And it also makes lower the humidity level compared to the surrounding soil. What this means is that crops above these structures tend to have a reduced growth. They grow less, they become yellow earlier, and they created these negative marks. So these are called the negative crop marks. At the opposite, in areas where we have ditches or pits or other archaeological structure that have been dug up in the past, we have the opposite situation. So over time, these areas, these soils or these ditches or pits have been filled with a soil that is different from the one in the surrounding. And this difference in soil can potentially provide more nutrients to the plants so that the crops and plants over them could grow stronger, could grow greener, and produce what are called normally the positive crop marks. Something similar happens also when there is no vegetation. So when we have bare soils and we can see the elements under the soil, because they are, the colors are different, or there is a different level of humidity. And another thing that can happen, especially if these are agricultural fields, is that then when they are plowed, the structures that are underneath the soil are broken by the plow, and parts of the structures are taken on the surfaces, creating some sort of long, clean, bright features that can be seen quite easily from above. And finally, we have other type of traces that are visible from above, that are due to a different type of phenomenon. These are structures that are partially exposed, just possibly a few centimeters, something that we could not perceive if we were there. But the microtopography that is determined by these features becomes visible under specific lighting. So when the sun is at its lowest point in the early morning, for example, or in the evening, the oblique light rays produce visible shadows that can be quite easily recorded from above. So again, from airplanes or even satellites. So we know that archaeologists now are able to identify these traces, they can't just identify traces. They are not able to say if they are really archaeological features. So they have to validate them. So what they do normally is to map these traces in what is called a geographic information system. So a digital tool that enables to bring together spatial data. And these tools are used to manage multiple types of informations and a very heterogeneous data set, and try to understand if these marks that they have been noticing are really archaeological. Now, back to us, and let's try to understand how artificial intelligence can work with this, and what is that it can bring on that was not possible before using traditional methods. So in this case, I'm going to speak about a project that we have recently launched together with the European Space Agency. European Space Agency holds and manages a set of a constellation of satellites that are going constantly around the planet Earth and taking images, taking satellite images that are then available to researchers and all the European citizens for free. So what we are doing right now is to use artificial intelligence, basically, or we are building the system that will enable us to do automatically what the archaeologists have been doing for all these years manually, just standing in front of the screen. So this system enables us to really accelerate and speed up will be when it will be totally working, we are still in the process, we'll be able to really speed up all this process of both detecting and also interpret the images that are collected by satellites. And it works a little bit like the schema you can see in your screen. So basically, we teach the machine what is an archaeological feature, what is not, and then we ask the machine, so based on what we have just told you, can you tell me if this is a feature or not? So the machine basically starts to learn, and starts to learn also by making a lot of mistakes at the beginning, but slowly the machine gets to the point and starts to do what we normally do as interpreters. And what happens is that the machine starts to be able to look at an image and find these features that could have an archaeological reason for being there. And it is also able to, little bit at the time, it's able also to tell us, well, this feature is 90% reliable, or this feature is like 20% reliable. So because the machine is learning, and there is this continuous support also from the humans at the beginning, where we have to teach the machine, this is correct, this is not. So it is a long process. It will take years in the development, but we are starting already to have very good results, and machines are starting to really be able to detect features that are likely of archaeological origin. So there is probably an underneath structure there. So what can then our artificial intelligence do for us? Well, it can do a lot. It can do a lot more than what we can do, because the point is that these satellite imagery are constantly recorded. Every 5 days, there is a complete set of satellite imagery from all the planet. So this means that we have been producing in the past years a huge number of satellite imagery, which we will never be able to really check by ourselves as humans. So the machines are learning to do this work for us. And this is extremely important, because it is connected to something that we heard from the previous conversation that was with the Professor Petty. So mapping this feature is important for protecting them, first of all, because we need to know where these features are. And it is certainly very important from the point of view of having know more about our past, certainly, but it is also very important to know where they are located before they are excavated, because in this way we can really protect them. And this is extremely important if you think about the fact that very often what happens is that especially here in Italy, but all over Europe, very often we have heard that the major infrastructures have been stopped because they have been, during the excavation or initial work, they have found archaeological features and the work had to be stopped. So creating archaeological risk maps that are constantly updated by new data that are being generated by satellite, and then they are processed by artificial intelligence almost real time, will put in our hands archaeological risks map that will be able really to help us to protect our cultural landscapes and all the archaeological sites of which we still don't know anything yet. But it's not just about discovering something, it's also about protecting. Earth observation make it possible also to identify traces of clandestine excavations, so what is called normally looting, that are carried out especially in areas that are unprotected or are remote, they are difficult to reach or dangerous to reach. For example, let's think about the turmoils in the Middle East in the past years, and when archaeological excavations were very difficult. So we can use satellite imagery for this scope, for this reason, to go to check certain areas, to check if looting is happening, so illegal excavation is happening. And we can do this because we have so many images now that come out every number of days, and we can really take, observe certain areas and keep an eye on them, making sure that illegal activities are not happening. So this brings me to another project that we started. We are starting this moment with the Italian Space Agency. using using specific typology of processing of the images to go to look for the presence of illegal excavation, especially when it has been covered up by vegetation or it is being hidden in some way. So in the next years, we will be working on developing the tools that will enable us to be able to see where illegal excavation is ongoing or has happened recently, and also to be able to see how this has been done, because this is an important, it might not sound interesting, but this is a very important information, because if we know how illegal excavators work, we know more also how to fight them, and we have more information to stop these illegal activities. And speaking about illegal excavation and looting, that brings me to speak about another type of application of artificial intelligence that we are developing within our center, which is using AI to stop or support law enforcement agencies to stop trafficking of cultural heritage. And also in this case, machine learning and especially deep learning can help us really a lot, because you must know that a lot of the trafficking of cultural heritage actually happens on the internet. Even websites that seems to be totally not harmful, like could be some social media, or it could be, for example, some auction houses, not art auction houses, but I mean platforms where you can buy and share things. Well, even those are used, unfortunately, for trafficking cultural heritage. So it is very important to check what's going on in the internet. But clearly, it's not possible to do it as humans in front of the screen, because the amount of objects that are daily trafficked is so high that it's impossible to do that. So what we are working on is to create systems that enable us to look at the internet every day and to check if there are objects that could come from the illicit market, and flag these to the law enforcement agencies so that this traffic can be stopped. And now we move to a completely different type of artificial intelligence use, and go back to Pompeii, where we were before, but for something that is completely different and another type, a very different type of technology. So I'm going to tell you something more about how we are using AI and robotics in Pompeii. And mine sounds a little bit strange to hear about robots in Pompeii, but that's what we are building as well. We have started this project 2 months ago. It has been funded by the European Commission. It's a work we are doing with the Ca' Foscari University and a number of other partners from several European European countries and from Israel. So what we're doing there is to reconstruct shattered frescoes. So as you know, many of the frescoes in the houses of Pompeii were destroyed first from the earthquake and later on also from bombing of the Second World War. So what we are doing in this project, which is really in a sense visionary, we are taking this huge amount of frescoes that are destroyed and trying to use both AI and robotics to reconstruct them. And this is necessary because the amount of pieces that are there is so high that would be impossible for humans to do this work manually. We have calculated that just for a small lot of these frescoes would take 4 years to scan them, which is just the first step to reconstruct the entire fresco. So in this project, what we're going to do is to build the robotic arms that will help us first to scan in 3D all the thousands and thousands of fragments that are there. And then we will use artificial intelligence to puzzle them together in a virtual way, so just on the computer. And then the artificial intelligence that has developed these will move the information again to the robotic arms that will start to reassemble physically the entire fresco in small parts. Probably we will have to see how to really do it in reality, because it is going to be really complicated. But at the end of the process, we will be able to have the frescoes really reconstructed, not just virtually, but the robotic arms will complete the restoration work. So the images that you are seeing now on the screen are related to one of the first frescoes that we are going to work on, which is about 15,000 pieces. As you can see, the pieces are really, really a lot, and an attempt of piecing them manually, didn't bring too much in the past years. So we are really working hard, and we will be also supported by other colleagues there from Switzerland that will help us to understand more of the iconography of these frescoes in order to support also the artificial intelligence, because the system, the machine will have to learn a little bit more about the frescoes and what type of styles were used and so on. So this work will happen in the next 3 years, and we are really hoping to be successful to be able to repiece together and bring back these frescoes so that tourists in the future will be able to see not only the houses restored, but also the frescoes. And now I'll, since I'm aware of the time that is going by, I'll speak very quickly about other 2 projects that we are working on, which is the use of AI for trying to understand a little bit more about these cuneiform tablets that have these strange holes that you see depicted there. Those are called firing holes. Philologists and archaeologists have never really understood what they were for. So what we are doing now is to train artificial intelligence just to help us to understand why these texts are full of these holes and what they were meaning in the past. And together with that, we are working using artificial intelligence also for studying manuscripts, where we are training machines in order to support us in the automated transcription of ancient and historical text. And finally, just the 2 words, given that Costanza before mentioned it. The other thing that we can do with artificial intelligence is support the work of scientists like Costanza and her team are doing. So they generate constantly thousands and thousands of new data from the analysis they do of the materials that are the materials of the cultural heritage. What we can do, what we are working on, is how to process them using machine learning that can be used to better understand the connection that exists between these data. So we can put them together. We can put them, if it would be really, this is our dream, I think, for the future, that to put everything on cloud, all the data that we produce, and have artificial intelligence helping us to really speed up the process of understanding them. And this would really bring us in our hands an incredible instrument that would enable us not only to protect the object, but also to understand their provenance, separate fakes from real object, and much more. So I see really artificial intelligence, machine learning specifically, as something that will really be in our future more and more, as it is happening in a lot of other fields and domain. I hope that in the future I will be able to tell you also more about the results that we are achieving by training this machine. Let's hope they are good students.
Thank you so much, Ariana, for this fascinating presentation, and really let's hope that your robot and your AI manages to reconstruct that frescoes, which really look like a daunting task. So good luck with that. So we're close to the end, but we have a few questions, and if you can stay with us a few more minutes, and if we try to give very quick answers, maybe we can answer some of the questions that came in the Q&A. I'll pick up a few for Costanza Miliani. I'll put together 2 questions. One is, regarding the scroll research, are the inks radio opaque? And the question is, some conversation methods such as CT scans have had promising results in viewing the written words in books without opening them. So could this style of methods work here to read the scrolls and preserve them? And another person in the audience was asking if the MA XRF scanning device that you shown was actually built at CNR or was built elsewhere. So
as regards the first question, actually no, the ink is based on carbon. So we have carbon against carbon from the carbonization. And so this is the challenging of the work. Nevertheless, for the example, I just put the name of the reference. In the case of unrolled, scientists brought the unrolled papyrus in the synchrotron facility. In that case, with phase contrast X-ray, they were able to see a very small signal that is anyhow a difference between carbon from the ink and carbon from the papyrus for a different crystalline structure. But in any case, they are not radio opaque, and this is the problem. This is the challenge. Yeah. For the X-ray mapping machine is yes, it is built at the X-ray lab facility of the Institute of Heritage Science in Catania. They are now developing also an X-ray diffraction mapping system. They have other systems, for example, also to do the profile, so X-ray profile. So this is going to give a three-dimensional analysis. So not only the surface, but also the 3D dimensional mapping of X-ray elements.
Okay. Two questions for Ariana Travis that I will try to sum up. One is about the resolution of satellite measurements. What kind of objects can be detected and at which depth? And another one regarding more the machine learning methods. How can you minimize bias in the data sets?
That is a big question. Let's start with the first. So, well, there is a spatial resolution of data depends a lot on what the type of sensor. We have a very high resolution sensors that can get down to 30 centimeters. We have others that do not reach that that type of resolution, that they get to up to 5-10 meters also. So it depends a lot on what is available. So with very high spatial resolution objects, we can detect the features that can be even in the range of less than a meter or a couple of meters, because what we look is not only what is in one pixel, but also all the surrounding. With the higher, with the not so good resolution, we can only detect things that are much larger. Like, let's think about what could be look like a road, a Roman road under grass, or something that is rather big, so it can be seen. Even the spatial resolution of the object is not very good. But normally what we see best are like settlement, and because it's not only the fact of seeing something somewhere, but also to look at what is around. So it's much easier, for example, to see to be able to detect an entire settlement, because you will see a lot of features with similar shape or similar orientation, for example, and it will be much easier to do a detection. As far as the bias, this is very, very difficult, and it's not only in our field, but also in other fields. So what we are trying to do is to create a data set that we analyze as automatically as possible to remove this kind of bias. Because the fact that we are using, for example, there is a big difference we see in when we use satellite imagery, because us as humans, all of us see different things and perceive different things. So if I give to 10 people the same image and ask them, look and tell me where are the archaeological features underground here, these 10 people will give me 10 different answers, because each of us is different and each of us has a different scientific background or different experience and so on. So each of us will provide a different type of answers. This doesn't happen with the machine, or we can minimize it in the machine, because the machine applies only the same level of understanding and knowledge in the same identical way. So in this way, we will try to balance things and make sure that there is not too much bias.
Okay, thank you. There was a comment, not really a question, but a comment in the chat box towards the beginning from a person who actually lives in Arslan Tepe, if I understand well from the comment, and who was noting how important was the contribution of Marcela Franzipane and her team in achieving this result of the UNESCO World Heritage Site recognition. Now, Marcela Franzipane, you have said in occasions that that was a good example of community archaeology, and because we often speak in many fields of science of how important it is to make research participated by communities, I thought that would be an interesting concept to expand a little bit, not too much, but a little bit. And I think you're muted. Yeah.
Okay. So yes, thanks for this question, because it's one of the most important aspects of our final results. I mean, in terms of communication with the public. Yes, we really had the possibility to, probably thanks to the long-term project, because this is an important aspect. Of course, if you work in a place for 4 or 5 years, you have not the possibility to establish this kind of relationship with the local population. We have been working there for, this is our 60, not me, but the Italian team, 60 years of excavation. So generations of people have worked on the site. And this is the main way to really make people conscious of the importance of their heritage. And now people not only love this place, but they are, of course, everyone at the level of knowledge they have. So they are not scientists, but they have the perfect concept and ideas that this place represent them, represent their identity, their history. And so they want to protect the site. And this, in fact, is the only way to really protect the site, even from looting, from illegal excavation, because people live around and protect the site. So we have a guardian that stay there all year round, but it would not have been enough, I think, because we work there 2 months, 2.5 months a year, and then we go. Of course, there is the local museum, now we have an open air museum, so there are other guardians there, but it would not have been enough, because I know that our guardian told me that when people from the village say somebody they don't know, or a car, or somebody who is stopping there in a strange time or whatever, they immediately call him. And they said, please go and look, who is this? So there is a real interest in protecting something that they feel as their own
and
heritage. So this is the real, and when the UNESCO, the ICOMOS team came for their inspection, because, you know, before the final process procedures for the inscription in the UNESCO heritage, there are inspections made by ICOMOS, and they wanted to meet the local people. So they know that this is an important aspect, and they were impressed, because people said Aslantepe is ours, they said. And so this, of course, is not only a way for us to work in the best way, because we have never had problems, so we worked very quietly and very fruitfully with all the workers that know the place, know how to work, know the method, and so on, but also for protection. So I think it's the only way to speak about public archaeology. It's not to try to teach them something or to make them learn something of the past that they are not interested in.
Luigi Petti wants to intervene, maybe, then I...
Yes, just on these topics, because public in general and communities are really relevant. In the case of Pestum, the monitoring network, I do not told this before, is completely funded by private, by using art bonus, and local farmers completely supported economic these activities, just to give the importance in the community to participate and to call together to manage.
Okay, very interesting. That leads me to another question, which may probably be the last that we have time to answer. But I think it was originally probably intended for Costanza Miliani, but I think many of you could have something to say about it. And the original question was, as far as I understand, it's an anonymous attendee, unfortunately. Most of the experiments through spectroscopic techniques or the like are led by academic institutions. How is the private sector moving in this field? Or are there specific reasons why not many companies are around to help? Now that's kind of a transversal theme. I think many of you could have a perspective on how existent, helpful, and even desirable, maybe, the involvement of the private sector can be in the studies and preservation of cultural heritage. Because of course, as we know, in particular in Italy, we have a problem when it comes to funding research. So the intervention of private companies could be of help in many cases. But is this happening? Let's see.
I can answer to the specific question is about why the private sector is not conducting this type of measurements. This I understood in this way. So I have to say that I kept the level a little bit high, but the type of equipment are not so basic equipment. So it is not easy for a private company also doing diagnostic to keep this level, and it's normal that a research center or an academic is developing new equipment and is putting the research at the very up level. Nevertheless, there are companies doing diagnostic, specifically in Italy, and they are going very well. And it's very nice to have this sort of interaction. So the research center or academic is developing something, is using at the beginning, and then it can be transferred to the private sector. And so I see very well this synergy. The problem of funding of restoration and funding of research projects is another topic, and maybe our colleague can answer. And of course, it's very important.
Okay, I kind of have a closing question, unless someone wants to add something on these specific points. But my closing question would be on a topic that at Nature Italy we've covered quite extensively. As anyone who is living in Italy knows, we have something called the PNRR, the National Resilience Plan, that is making available an unprecedented level of funding for many things, including research and including the preservation of cultural heritage. Actually, if you go through the document, you see a lot of specific sections about topics that we have discussed today, from digitalization to seismic risk protection, to increasing the preparation of the staff of the public administration, specifically for the work on cultural heritage, etc. So we hear a lot in Italy about cultural heritage being the country's oil, being the country's great resource. How do you see the plans that have been laid out, the level of investments that is being announced? Does this interest that is always declared at the political level in cultural heritage translate actually into more interest for research, for innovation in this field? Or does it stay more, let's say, on the touristic promotion side, which is, of course, very important, but by itself probably not enough? I know it's a big question, but maybe if we can have a very quick round of opinions, and then I think we will salute the audience. Who wants to start? Maybe Ariana. I saw you were...
Yeah, so yeah, it is true what you said. There are a lot of funds that will be available, especially for some areas like the digitization of cultural heritage. Of course, COVID has made very, very clear that we are really behind standards, European standards in Italy as far as digitization of cultural heritage. So there are substantial funds. They go on top of other funds that were promised from the European Commission even before and arrived partially. But so the number of funds that will be available and will be available for both the academic, the research domain, but also for the public sector will be quite consistent. And I'm saying this also because in the past it has never been much, and now it's going to be, and will be able to help different type of actors, so academia, research centers, research institutions, private, to work more on this. Of course, the aspect of the tourism that you mentioned is also connected. You know, to have the ability of showing what you have in an archaeological park or in a museum, it has been demonstrated can really attract more tourists or more visitors. Let's call them visitors, because more than tourists, it would be nice if they were visiting rather than just being tourists. But let's call them visitors in this case. So it would be really, it will be able to attract even more people. So it will be beneficial in all the steps. So from the research side, the development, the fact of doing things, so having also the private sector helping to digitize the heritage, and then moving also to the aspect of attracting more visitors for museums and archaeological parks. And let's hope that we can really use this unique opportunity, I would say, and we are able to manage it in a good way so that it can be really helpful for the future of Italian cultural heritage.
Okay, thanks a lot. And the others, maybe Luigi Petti, you want to say something? There is a lot about protection from risks in the plan.
Yes, protection of risk is just one point of view of course of the matter. The PNRR is a relevant opportunity, of course, in all our sectors. I think that it's opportune to have a common point of view of the aims. To avoid multiple interventions, small intervention, but we need to have a common vision. I think that this is a need, one of the most important aspects that we need to consider.
Okay, maybe Costanza Miliani and then Marcella, and then we close.
Yes. Sure, it is a great opportunity for the country to put the light and the interest on our cultural heritage even more than was in the past. I would like to go behind the contraposition between tourism and between preservation. We really need to have a sort of virtuous circle that is knowledge allows for preservation, and knowledge allows for valorization. So really we have to work with all these 3 points in our view, and no more of this type of
sealed containers.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. Marcela Franzipane, how do you hope this opportunity will be used?
Of course, as everybody has said, so it's a great opportunity because of at least the amount of money dedicated also to this aspect, to this sector is unusual. So it's important. But from my point of view, I see just one problem. So that is, in my opinion, at least, it is too much aimed at the concept of innovation as an innovation, a technological innovation. I think that now the last document, I think, is better than the first one. When I saw the first one, I was really quite upset because the so-called fundamental research was not so much considered with respect to the applied research. And I think that both things should be considered in the same way, because innovation is innovation of thinking, is innovation, it's creativity, it's and also in our field, I think. So knowledge, as Costanza said before, so develop knowledge that is not only develop technologies. So I think that this is the most weak part of the document, I think.
Nature Italy's readers may remember that we had a whole event in May when the plan was finalized where we discussed many aspects of the PNRR, its implications for science, and among other things, this contraposition between applied and fundamental research. But overall, what we always all agree on is that this is an unprecedented opportunity for cultural advancement and for research, which we do not have to squander. So we're a bit late, but I want to thank again so much the audience for staying with us until now, and our speakers, Marcela Franzipane, Luigi Petti, Costanza Miliani, and Ariana Travis. Thanks to everyone who was with us today, and thanks to Jennifer Stotz and Mohamed Yahia from Nature, who supported me in conducting this event. And I want to once again remind all the participants that the recording will be available shortly, and you will be notified by email, and you will also find it on the Nature Italy website. It was a great event. Thanks a lot to everyone who participated, and I hope to see you all again at one of our future events on other topics. Thanks a lot.
Thanks to you, Nicola, for organizing this. Well, it was really an important thing made by Nature. So it's a way of opening new routes for the journal. And
that's what we hope to do. Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you to Jennifer.
Bye.
Also. Thank you to Jennifer.
Bye.